The conjunction of Saturn and Rahu within a single astrological degree represents one of the most volatile, karmically heavy, and psychologically polarizing alignments an individual can carry through life. In the traditional lexicon of Vedic astrology, this combination is often referred to by the somber titles of Shrapat Yoga, the cursed alignment, or Nandi Yoga, signifying an ancestral ledger of unfulfilled desires and structural blockages that must be accounted for in the current incarnation. This alignment brings together two malefic forces that operate with entirely antithetical mechanics. Saturn is the ultimate cosmic architect of containment, representing slow chronological time, cold reality, absolute boundaries, tradition, and the exhausting necessity of disciplined labor. Rahu, the north node of the moon, is a headless, disembodied shadow planet operating as the cosmic engine of insatiable obsession, taboo breaking, illusion, and sudden, explosive expansion. When these two antithetical titans fuse, Saturn tries to put handcuffs on a ghost. The native psyche becomes a permanent battleground where a desperate, driving hunger for worldly amplification is born encased in concrete, creating an ambient life experience defined by extreme frustration, sudden structural collapses, and a profound evolutionary pressure to alchemize raw obsession into mastery. To comprehend the torturous internal architecture of the Saturn-Rahu conjunction is to examine a psychic apparatus trapped in a perpetual state of gears grinding against each other. Rahu acts as an amplification vortex, injecting an intense, obsessive hunger into whichever house it occupies. It demands immediate gratification, thrives on shortcuts, and looks to transcend human limitations through unconventional or radical means. However, because Saturn is fused directly onto this point of obsession, it acts as a massive emergency brake clamped down on Rahu's accelerator. Every time the native experiences a surge of ambitious drive or a desperate urge to project themselves forward, they crash violently into a brick wall of real-world delays, institutional blockages, or psychological paralysis. The individual does not experience normal, linear progress. Instead, they live in a high-pressure cooker where their grandest desires are systematically starved of easy fulfillment, forcing them to endure a long, grueling apprenticeship with time itself. This permanent friction breeds a dangerous, fragmented behavioral mechanism known as the tyrant-rebel split. Because the native cannot find a smooth, integrated expression for their ambitions, their personality tends to swing between extreme energetic polarities. Under the dominant influence of Saturn, they can present to the world as hyper-cautious, rigid traditionalists who are paralyzed by a fear of making mistakes or violating societal protocols. They become excessively dutiful, taking on immense burdens of responsibility and policing their own desires with draconian severity. Yet beneath this stoic, hyper-controlled facade, the Rahu current continues to pool like volatile subterranean magma. When the Saturnian dam inevitably breaks, the Rahu archetype erupts with destructive force, driving the native into sudden, reckless acts of self-sabotage, an obsession with unorthodox or taboo subjects, and a compulsive urge to burn down the very foundations they spent years building just to escape the suffocating weight of containment. The roots of this profound existential frustration are almost invariably traced back to an early childhood environment defined by intense instability, systemic restriction, or a profound atmosphere of hypocrisy regarding authority figures. The child typically grew up in a world where the established structures, whether familial, religious, or societal, were experienced as deeply oppressive, yet fundamentally fragile or corrupt. They may have been forced to conform to rigid, traditional expectations while witnessing the adults around them violate those exact rules in secret. This early blueprint teaches the subconscious a devastating lesson. The structures of the world cannot be trusted, yet you will be brutally punished if you do not submit to them. As a result, the adult native carries a deep-seated, ambient paranoia regarding institutions and authority figures, constantly oscillating between a desperate need to gain societal status and an equal, underlying urge to completely subvert the system. Energetically and physically, hosting this volatile energetic compound places an immense, exhausting strain on the individual's physical vehicle. Saturn rules the structural framework of the body, including the bones, joints, teeth, and chronic, long-term conditions, while Rahu rules hidden toxicities, neurological distortions, phobias, and mysterious, undiagnosable illnesses. When they fuse, Rahu injects a chaotic, electric current directly into Saturn's structural domain. This manifests somatically as severe, systemic nervous system exhaustion, chronic phantom pains, and localized joint calcifications that seem to defy standard medical treatment. The native's body is a literal lightning rod for the unexpressed psychological tension generated by their locked desires, frequently resulting in acute bouts of hypochondria, severe panic disorders, or sudden, mysterious drops in physical vitality that occur whenever they feel structurally trapped or emotionally disempowered by their circumstances. Furthermore, this conjunction is notorious for engineering dramatic wipeout phases in the native's career and external life path. Because Rahu rules sudden, unconventional rises and Saturn rules the ultimate fall from grace if the foundation is weak, these individuals rarely experience a stable, predictable professional trajectory. They are highly prone to sudden, meteoric ascents where they achieve immense power, wealth, or recognition through unorthodox methods, only to experience an equally sudden, catastrophic collapse when Saturn audits their shortcuts and demands payment for their skipped steps. These cyclical purges are not malicious acts of fate, but evolutionary course corrections. The universe refuses to allow the Saturn-Rahu native to build an empire on an illusion. It will repeatedly dismantle their fragile structures until they learn to match their radical Rahu vision with a diamond-hard, unassailable Saturnian integrity. The ultimate evolutionary architecture of the Saturn-Rahu conjunction is not designed to sentence the individual to a lifetime of perpetual defeat, but to forge a pioneer capable of anchoring monumental, cutting-edge transformations within society. This aspect represents a highly advanced cosmic training program where the soul is being taught how to build a bridge between the ancient past and the far future. The universe deliberately starves them of easy, conventional success so that they are forced to dismantle their internal panic, drop their codependency on societal validation, and discover an unshakable, internal authority that is entirely self-sourced. The grand alchemy of this placement typically begins to manifest in the late 30s and early 40s, particularly after the second Saturn return and as the native moves past the maturity of Rahu. The healing process requires a radical, deeply courageous act of psychological integration. The individual must cease fighting the external limitations of their life and instead learn to wield Saturn's discipline not as a prison cell, but as the flawless laboratory equipment required to safely contain and channel Rahu's explosive nuclear energy. They must stop looking for shortcuts, accept the slow, agonizing reality of mastery, and willingly do the tedious, behind-the-scenes labor required to ground their radical insights into physical reality. When a Saturn-Rahu native finally alchemizes this aspect, shifting from a frustrated, self-sabotaging captive of their own obsessions into a supreme master of concentrated destiny, a magnificent transfiguration occurs. The heavy, cursed energy dissolves, leaving behind an invincible, diamond-hard column of pure strategic authority and generational innovation. They emerge into the second half of life completely immune to the manipulations, gaslighting, and illusions of the collective. Having sat in the absolute darkest, coldest furnaces of internal frustration and mastered the terrifying architecture of their own shadow, they become the truest architects of the new age. They develop into extraordinary tech pioneers, revolutionary sociologists, master occultists, and structural reformers, individuals who can look directly into the chaotic, unformed future, capture its most radical potentials, and build the enduring, unshakable institutions that will steady and guide a changing world for generations to come. To dismantle the outermost armored defenses of the Saturn-Rahu conjunction is to uncover a psychological landscape that has been explicitly engineered to function as a particle accelerator built inside a medieval dungeon. While the visible manifestation of this aspect often presents as an intimidating capacity for hyperfocus, a cold and calculated approach to systemic engineering, and an uncanny ability to navigate highly complex, bureaucratic, or taboo environments, a clinical descent into its core reveals a darker reality. The native operates under a permanent subconscious mandate that dictates they are an evolutionary alien, permanently exiled from the regular, comforting currents of human life. Saturn is the conscious ego attempting to belong through traditional status and absolute adherence to the rules of the matrix. Rahu is the foreign entity, the cosmic glitch, and the insatiable shadow trying to hack the system from within. The conjunction places these two into a state of absolute, localized fusion, forcing the individual to spend decades living with a mind that is simultaneously terrified of societal exclusion and driven by a compulsive urge to commit sacrilege against the status quo. The most profound, insidious pathology of this configuration is a phenomenon that can be defined as the hyperfixation on the forbidden summit. Because the native psychic engine is calibrated to experience intense friction at the point of their deepest desires, Rahu creates a hyper-focused, almost manic obsession with achieving mastery in fields that are unorthodox, highly competitive, or gatekept by impenetrable traditional hierarchies. A Saturn-Rahu individual does not want standard, ordinary success. They want to conquer the apex of the machine while simultaneously rewriting its laws. They are drawn to the cutting edge of technology, occult sciences, global logistics, or deep state politics, arenas where massive, institutionalized power meets chaotic, unpredictable variables. The tragedy of this ambition is that it is born into a Saturnian prison of systematic delay. The universe denies them the normal, smooth pathways of advancement, forcing them to sit in the waiting room of destiny for years, watching less qualified, more conventional peers coast past them, which breeds a silent, toxic ocean of envy and resentment that eats away at their peace of mind. This permanent internal blockade breeds a dangerous behavioral mechanism known as the architectural sabotage. Because these individuals are hardwired to believe that any reward not paid for in the currency of blood, sweat, and profound frustration is an illusion, they develop an absolute intolerance for easy progress. If a project, a career trajectory, or a personal relationship begins to develop with effortless fluidity, the Saturn-Rahu native experiences an acute surge of subconscious panic. They interpret ease as a trap or a sign of imminent failure. To relieve this internal tension, they will unconsciously deploy Rahu's chaotic, destabilizing energy to inject a massive, volatile variable directly into the foundation. They will spark an unnecessary political war with an authority figure, pivot to a completely different and untested methodology at the 11th hour, or introduce a highly disruptive, unorthodox element that shatters the established structure. They intentionally break the machine so they can return to the familiar, comforting labor of trying to fix it under conditions of extreme duress, mistaking the exhausting ache of crisis management for authentic evolutionary growth. Furthermore, this alignment creates a highly problematic, almost symbiotic relationship with the concept of the systemic outcast. The Saturn-Rahu native carries a deep-seated, ambient guilt that whispers they are inherently fraudulent, a cosmic impostor who has snuck into the halls of tradition under false pretenses. They are terrified that if the world looks too closely at their work, their ideas, or their lifestyle, they will be exposed as a radical charlatan and cast out into the cold. To manage this fear, they often become hyper-conformists on the surface, adopting an armor of rigid professionalism, academic titles, or traditional dogmas with an obsessive precision that borders on caricature. Yet, this total surrender to the rules is a defensive masquerade. In the private corners of their mind, they nurse a profound contempt for the very structures they serve, leading to a fragmented double life where they act as the iron-fisted enforcers of the law by day, while secretly experimenting with the fringe, the taboo, and the revolutionary by night. On a genetic and karmic level, this conjunction indicates that the individual has been appointed as the absolute lightning rod for a family lineage that has been paralyzed by a legacy of unfulfilled, repressed ambition and structural displacement. They inherit a cellular memory choked by ancestors who were forced to live as outcasts, immigrants who were structurally barred from participating in society, or individuals who possessed brilliant, radical visions but were utterly crushed by the rigid, unyielding dogmas of their time. The native does not just carry personal stress, they carry the compacted, radioactive hunger of 100 dead lineages that died staring through the glass at a life they were never allowed to touch. The native's psychic atmosphere feels heavy and serious because they are the designated alchemist who must choose either to let this volatile ancestral hunger explode into a life of criminal self-sabotage, or do the agonizing work of building a physical, legitimate bridge capable of anchoring this generational ambition in the real world. The ultimate evolutionary liberation for the Saturn-Rahu native requires a radical, terrifying act of psychological surrender. They must learn the supreme courage of trusting chronological time. The agonizing, repeating cycle of sudden ascents and catastrophic, self-inflicted falls will never cease until the individual realizes that Saturn's delays are not a punishment, but a security measure. The universe is intentionally holding them back because Rahu's nuclear ambition would instantly vaporize a fragile personality structure. They are being forced to sit in the furnace of delay until their ego shell has been entirely burned away and replaced by a diamond-hard chassis of unassailable moral and functional integrity. They must drop their obsession with shortcuts, accept the grueling slow-motion reality of true mastery, and learn to honor the rules of the matrix before they can be granted the authority to transcend them. When a Saturn-Rahu native finally alchemizes this aspect, shifting from a frustrated, self-sabotaging captive of their own obsessions into a sovereign master of concentrated destiny, a magnificent, unparalleled transfiguration occurs. The heavy iron handcuffs dissolve, leaving behind an invincible, diamond-hard column of pure strategic authority and generational innovation. They emerge into the second half of life completely immune to the trends, illusions, and gaslighting of the collective. Having sat in the absolute darkest, coldest chambers of structural isolation and mastered the terrifying architecture of their own shadow, they become the truest architects of the future. They develop into the legendary pioneers of new eras, individuals who can look directly into the chaotic, unformed void of tomorrow, extract its most radical, taboo-breaking potentials, and build the enduring, unshakable physical institutions that will steady, shelter, and guide a changing civilization for centuries to come. Subscribe, like, and share.